I was 9 when my dad started waking us up for harvest runs. We'd sneak into barns and orchards, pick leftovers, take souvenirs. I thought it was fun, until a security guard caught him with $50,000 in stolen goods. He got 5 years. Now he's out. 17 calls. Rise and shine, boys. We're burning daylight. That was how it always started, every single year. My dad, Richard, knocking on our bedroom doors before the sun had even thought about rising, his voice thick with excitement. I'd barely get one eye open before he was already tossing our gear bags onto the floor. My name's Nate. I'm 17 now, but I've been going on these harvest runs since I was 9. We live in Grayson, a small town in western Missouri, mostly farmland and forgotten roads. And every fall, like clockwork, our dad took me and my younger brother, Ben, out on what he called the old gleaning runs. It sounded noble, like some ancient pioneer tradition. Dad said we were honoring something sacred and forgotten, gathering leftover crops from fields, old barns, shuttered orchards. Things nature left behind, he'd say, not stolen, rescued. Only take what the earth forgot, he'd remind us, packing up our canvas satchels with gloves, thermoses, and folding knives. The rule is simple. We never take from a place that's still in use. We always dress the same, matching red flannel shirts, thermal pants under our jeans, thick boots. It felt like a uniform, like we were a real crew. I used to be proud of that. Ben, 3 years younger, was always the eager one. He'd bounce in place waiting by the truck, already dreaming about what we'd find. Old apple crates, broken down corn huskers, bags of forgotten squash. To him, every outing was a treasure hunt. To me, at least back then, it felt like a secret mission. Something both sacred and a little dangerous. Keep your eyes open, Dad would say, tapping the truck's dashboard as we rumbled down old gravel roads. You never know what might still be hiding under all that dust. There was a code, too. A strict one. No phones, no pictures, no posting online. If we saw another car or a distant figure moving near the property, we used the word scarecrow and vanished without another word. And we never, ever returned to a place twice. When I was younger, I used to tell my friends about the runs. Tried to describe how cool it was. Me, Ben, and Dad moving like shadows through foggy fields, finding jars of pickled beans in an abandoned cellar or onions half buried in frost. But most kids just blinked at me. Some asked if it was legal. Others just nodded and changed the subject. Eventually, I stopped talking about it. To us, it felt like a ritual. A harvest blessing, not a crime. We'd kneel beside forgotten rows of potatoes and whisper thanks. We'd slice through dead vines to pull out the last of the season's beans and leave a handful behind. For the animals, Dad always said. At the end of each trip, we'd split a biscuit from the old tin we kept in the glove box. That was the tradition. Looking back now, it's hard to explain how something that felt so pure could also carry so much secrecy. Or why it was always in the back of my mind that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as harmless as Dad made it sound. But at the time, I didn't question it. I didn't ask why the locks on those barns were sometimes snapped open, or why we never ran into the owners. All I knew was this. It was fall, the flannel was warm, the thermos was full, and Dad was proud of us. And I wanted to believe we were doing something good. It happened on a random Saturday night, about 2 weeks after our last harvest run. I was over at my friend Luke's place for a sleepover, just pizza, video games, and the usual dumb stuff we did when we were bored. We'd been friends since 4th grade, the kind of friendship that didn't need much talking to feel solid. His parents were always cool, but strict in that old-school way. His dad worked for some insurance company. I never really paid attention to the details. Until that night. We were halfway through a game when I brought it up. You guys ever do scavenger runs? I asked, just making conversation. Like in old barns or farmhouses. Luke paused the game and gave me a weird look. What, like trespassing? I shook my head quickly. No, it's not like that. My dad calls it gleaning. We go to abandoned places, you know, like fields that nobody's using anymore. We only take what's left behind. Luke still looked confused. You mean, like real crops? Yeah, kind of, I said, feeling suddenly unsure. But just the stuff nobody wants. It's like this family tradition. Luke didn't say anything for a moment. Then he stood up and called toward the kitchen. Hey, Dad, can Nate ask you something? His dad came in a minute later, wiping his hands on a dish towel. What's up, boys? Luke nodded toward me. Nate's family goes on these, harvest trips. Like to empty fields and barns. He says they take food and stuff that's been left behind. I forced a laugh. It's not like stealing. My dad says it's legal. Like, we're not hurting anybody. Luke's dad didn't smile. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. Do you have permission to be on those properties? I hesitated. Well, they're abandoned. Nobody's around. My dad says if no one's using it, it's fair game. He nodded slowly. Nate, I work in crop insurance. I see cases all the time where people think a field is abandoned, but it's actually fallow. Or resting between seasons. That stuff's still owned. And barns. Even old ones. Unless you've got a sign note, you're technically trespassing. If you're taking property, that's theft. My throat tightened. But we're just taking leftovers. Stuff that would go bad anyway. Doesn't matter, he said gently, not unkind. If someone owns it, it's not yours to take. Even if it's rotting. That's the law. I didn't know what to say. The game controller sat heavy in my lap, the screen frozen mid-level. My face felt hot, like someone had flipped a switch inside me. Luke looked just as stunned as I felt. Sorry, dude. I thought you meant, like, geocaching or something. I managed a quiet, it's fine. That night, as I lay on the floor of Luke's room staring at the ceiling fan, everything shifted. Every barn, every field, every crate of dusty apples. It all felt different now. Not magical. Not sacred. Wrong. When I got home the next day, I tried to talk to Mom. Just casually, like, hey, do we actually have permission when we go on those runs? She paused. Only for a second, but it was enough. Then came the nervous smile, the cheerful voice that felt too light. Oh, honey, don't worry about that. Your father knows what he's doing. Now, how about some pancakes? And just like that, the conversation was over. But the doubt? It stayed. Dad said it would be our last run of the season. One final adventure, he called it. The leaves were just starting to fall, and the air had that cold bite that stuck to your skin even in sunlight. Ben was bouncing in the truck seat before we even left the driveway. You guys are gonna love this one, Dad said. His voice lit up like Christmas morning. Heard about it from a guy at the feed store. Untouched orchard. Heirloom stuff. Couple hours out near Eldridge. No one's touched it in years. Ben was practically drooling. I just nodded, pretending to be excited. But in my chest, that seed of doubt from Luke's dad had started to sprout roots. The place didn't look abandoned. That was the first thing I noticed. The driveway wasn't overgrown. It had tire tracks. The orchard itself was beautiful, rows of tidy apple trees still heavy with fruit. Some of the trees even had those mesh bags tied around the branches, like someone was protecting them. The hedges were trimmed. A swing hung from a tree in the distance. A rake leaned against the shed near the barn. I glanced at Dad. Doesn't look forgotten, I said quietly. Ben was already unbuckling his seatbelt. Place hasn't had anyone out here in years, Dad said quickly. Trust me, probably just some neighbors trying to keep it neat. Happens all the time. I didn't believe him, but I followed them anyway. Inside the barn, it was stunning. The whole thing smelled like sweet cider and wood smoke. There were bushels of apples lined neatly along the far wall, each labeled with the variety: Winesap, Arkansas Black, Ashmead's Kernel. Crates of glass bottles stacked along one side, filled with deep amber liquid, sealed and labeled with hand-lettered tags, Old Ridge Cider Company. Ben found a crate near the back with a lock on it, snapped off clean. Check this out. He pulled up the lid like a magician revealing a trick, grinning. Inside were bottles of rare wines, artisanal cheeses packed in wax paper, and a cloth bag of something that looked like truffle salt. This isn't forgotten, I said firmly, backing away. Dad, we can't take this. But Dad's face had already changed. It was tight. Determined. Pack it up, he said. Ben looked at me. Come on, Nate. This stuff is amazing. It's not ours. Dad turned to me, sharp. What do you think gleaning is, son? You think they're coming back for this? You think they'll even miss it? This is someone's business, I shot back. This isn't some roadside squash patch. They sell this stuff. Dad didn't respond. He just grabbed one of the crates and handed it to Ben. Then headlights. A truck. We all froze. Voices, two of them. Flashlights sweeping across the trees outside. Dad hissed, Scarecrow. Now. Go. We scattered. Ben bolted toward the back of the barn. I ducked behind a stack of pallets, heart pounding like a war drum. One of the flashlights beamed through the cracks in the wood. Someone outside shouted, "Freeze." Then a loud crash, metal on wood. A shovel hitting the barn door. Panic took over. I ran. Through the side door, down past the trees, not even looking where Ben or Dad had gone. Branches slapped my face. My legs burned. My breath ripped out of me in clouds. We regrouped at the truck, barely. Ben was laughing, still clutching a bottle like it was a trophy. Dad threw it in the back and fired up the engine. "Let's go. Now." We tore out of there, gravel spitting behind us. No one spoke on the drive home. The truck smelled like apples and fear. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling again. Not with wonder this time, but with shame. I knew the truth now. We weren't rescuing. We were stealing. We didn't make it home. About 20 miles outside of Grayson, red and blue lights lit up behind us. Dad cursed under his breath and told us to keep calm, but I could already feel my stomach dropping. 2 patrol cars boxed us in, and before we even had a chance to explain, we were told to step out of the vehicle, one by one. The cider crate was still in the back. Ben looked confused, scared, like he didn't understand how fast everything was happening. I didn't say a word. I just raised my hands like they told me and kept my eyes on the ground. They separated us right away. Different rooms, different chairs. Ben was taken somewhere else. Mom showed up about an hour later, her hair a mess, still in her robe and slippers, and I'll never forget the way she looked when they brought her in, like the whole world had collapsed and she hadn't figured out how to stand up yet. Dad didn't look at her. He just kept talking, all charm and calmness, trying to explain things away. "It's a misunderstanding," he told the officer who sat across from him. "We've done these runs for years. It's tradition. I grew up doing it. My sons are just carrying that on." But the officer didn't seem impressed. "The land is registered to a working farm. They filed a report. We have camera footage, license plate, everything. You entered a locked barn, removed goods, and fled when confronted by private security." Dad's smile faltered, but he didn't stop spinning it. We didn't know it was still active. Thought it was abandoned. Looked like no one had been there in a while. The officer raised an eyebrow. "With bottled cider and fresh produce inside." In another room, I sat across from a female officer who looked younger than my mom, but spoke with the same tired authority my teachers used when they knew I was lying. "Nate," she said gently, "we just want to hear your side." And I don't know what snapped. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear, but I told her everything. The harvest runs, the barn, the crates, the code word. I even mentioned the shovel, the flashlight, everything I could remember. It all poured out like water through a cracked pipe. Afterward, she looked at me like she didn't know whether to thank me or pity me. Ben came out later holding a plastic bag with some of the stuff he'd picked up, a cracked jar of preserves, an old knife with a wooden handle. He looked crushed when they told him to hand it over. "But it's just trash," he said softly. "We weren't going to sell it." They didn't respond. They just took it and labeled it evidence. Mom couldn't stop shaking. They let us go home, eventually, but not Dad. He was held for further questioning. Mom signed some paperwork and quietly told the officers we'd be staying with Aunt Marla. Marla was stunned. She kept pacing around her kitchen muttering, "I don't understand. I don't understand." Like saying it enough times might change the facts. She stared at Mom like she was a stranger. "I thought you were the sensible one," she whispered. "The church lady. The coupon queen. You let him drag those boys into this." Mom said nothing. That night, I lay awake in Marla's guest room with Ben asleep beside me. He kept murmuring in his sleep, something about apples, about hiding. I stared at the ceiling again, but there was no peace in it now. Just silence. My parents, the people who told me to follow the rules, who punished me for sneaking cookies or lying about grades. They'd been breaking the law for years. And I'd helped them do it. Every flannel shirt, every thermos of hot cider, every early morning felt twisted now. This wasn't a family tradition. It was a cover story, and I'd finally seen underneath. Back at home, everything felt off. The kitchen lights were too bright. The living room too quiet. The table was still set for dinner, plates left out like we might pick up where we left off. But we wouldn't. We couldn't. Dad didn't come home that night, or the night after. Mom barely spoke. She moved through the house like a ghost, washing dishes that were already clean, folding laundry that wasn't ours. Ben stayed glued to his room, eyes red from crying, but too proud to let any of it spill in front of me. It was on the third day that I finally asked her, "What's going to happen?" She paused, mid-sweep of the kitchen floor, like she hadn't heard me. Then she leaned the broom against the fridge and rubbed her forehead. You deserve the truth. We sat at the table. Her hands were shaking. Your dad? He hasn't worked at Keller AG Supply in almost 5 years. I blinked. What? He was laid off. Company downsized. He didn't want anyone to know. Said he'd figure something out. But the money. I started, but she cut me off. He started the harvest runs that year. Just to keep us afloat at first. Mostly food. A few forgotten tools. But over time, he found other places. Places with better stuff. High-end. He sold some of it. Quietly, under the table. My stomach turned. You're saying he made money off that? She nodded, slowly. That trip to Branson last year, she whispered. Ben's new bike. Your football gear. Even the new washing machine. It all came from what he called extra fines. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even look at her. I didn't know at first, she said, her voice cracking. But I started asking questions. And when I figured it out, I let it happen. We were behind on everything. And I told myself, he's not hurting anyone. I pushed away from the table and stumbled outside. My hands were shaking, my throat tight. The fall wind hit hard, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. All those mornings, all those thermoses and matching shirts, those weren't family memories. They were smokescreens. Cover stories for theft. That night, Ben crept into my room. He had something in his hand, a little mason jar filled with what looked like dried herbs and buttons. Found this under my bed, he whispered. Remember the cabin with the jars on the windowsill? I think it came from there. I didn't answer. Are we bad people? He asked, barely audible. I looked at him, really looked, and saw what Dad had done. Not just the stealing, the reshaping, the slow, quiet rewiring of what we thought was normal. No, I said finally. We just didn't know. But deep down, I wondered if that was true. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. 2 officers. A woman from Child Protective Services. They had a warrant. They searched the house. In the basement, they found crates labeled holiday decorations, filled with preserved foods and hand-stitched goods still in boutique packaging. A coffee table from a renovated barn. A box of antique tools. Another of sealed artisan soaps. I watched from the stairs as they opened it all. Each item had a story, a memory, and none of it was ours. The house that once felt like a home now looked like evidence. And I couldn't stop thinking about what else I hadn't seen. What else Dad had hidden. And who, exactly, we'd become trying to protect it. The news spread faster than I thought it would. I hadn't even made it halfway through first period Monday morning when I felt it. The stares. Not the curious kind. Not even the mean kind. The worst kind. Quiet. Calculated. Like people already knew the story and were waiting to see what I'd do next. By lunch, everyone did know. I sat at the end of the cafeteria, same spot I always did. But this time, no one joined me. Not even Brady, who I'd known since 3rd grade. He passed me without saying anything, like I was air. A few kids looked over, whispering, and I caught pieces of it. His dad got arrested. They stole from, 20 places. I think his family took stuff from the pumpkin patch. The one we went to last year. I clenched my jaw and stared at my tray. I wasn't hungry. Then I heard her voice, Haley, from my history class. She walked by my table and stopped short, pointing at the jacket I was wearing. Is that from Miller's Market? She asked. I looked up, confused. What? The jacket. My mom said they were missing a bunch of inventory. Is that where your dad got it? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't wait for an answer. Figures, she muttered and walked off. I just sat there. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. My ears. My entire body felt like it was burning. When I finally stood up, I didn't even make it 3 steps before Mr. Edmonds, our vice principal, stepped out from the hallway. Nate. Office. Now. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My legs moved on their own. Apparently, I'd shoved my tray too hard. Some mashed potatoes had landed on the floor. Someone said I slammed it aggressively. Someone else said I looked ready to fight. All I knew was that I was tired. So I sat there in the office, staring at the ugly carpet, while Edmonds flipped through paperwork. I know this is a difficult time, he said eventually, his voice careful. But lashing out isn't going to help anything. I didn't lash out, I muttered. Still, he said, we need to issue a suspension. Just 1 day. Let things cool off. I didn't argue. When I got home, Mom was crying in the laundry room. She tried to hide it, but her voice cracked when she asked why I was home early. I told her. She didn't say much, just nodded, then went back to folding towels that didn't need folding. Later that night, I helped her pack up boxes. The house was being seized. Turns out, when stolen goods cross state lines, it complicates things. The cider from the orchard? Sold to a vendor in Kansas. The barn tools? Traced to a closed estate in Illinois. That made it federal. We were being relocated, they called it. Really, we were being erased. Quietly. Shamefully. Like a stain no one wanted to scrub but couldn't ignore anymore. As we packed, I found the knife Dad had given me for my 12th birthday. Carbon steel, wood handle, initials etched into the side. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it gently into the donation box. I didn't want it anymore. Mom broke down that night, full-on sobbing, knees to the floor. She kept saying, I didn't know. I didn't know. I sat beside her and didn't say anything. I was angry, furious, even. But I was also sad. Not for her. For me. For Ben. For everything we thought we were. You can't unraise your kids with lies, she said between sobs, and expect no fallout. I didn't answer, because she was right, and we were the fallout. We didn't talk about the move much. The apartment was smaller, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, peeling paint on the windowsills. It smelled like someone else's cooking no matter how often we aired it out. But it was quiet, and cheap, and temporary, at least according to Mom. Ben didn't complain once, but something in him changed. He stopped talking about the harvest runs, stopped asking about Dad. Just shut down. Spent most of his time in his room building towers out of old Lego bricks and tearing them down again. About a month after we moved in, I noticed things going missing. Nothing big, just small stuff. A shiny spoon from the communal mailroom kitchen drawer. A novelty keychain from the neighbor's doorknob. A stamp, rare, vintage-looking, from the apartment manager's desk. I found it all hidden in a shoebox under Ben's bed. When I confronted him, he froze. His face went pale, and he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I was going to put it back, he whispered. Ben, why? He swallowed hard. I miss it. Miss what? The runs, he said. Not the stealing part. Just the part where we were together. The adventure. It felt real. Like we had a thing. He looked down at the floor, twisting his fingers into his shirt. Now we don't do anything. And nobody talks to us. People act weird. And I don't know what's okay anymore. I sat on the edge of his bed and didn't speak for a while. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't even trying to keep the stuff. He just didn't know how to let go of what we'd lost. What Dad had turned into something exciting and special, then poisoned without us even realizing it. I finally said, you can't take things, Ben. Even if you miss how it felt. That's not ours to touch. He sniffled and nodded. I know. I didn't think I was stealing. I just wanted to feel something normal. My throat tightened. I helped him gather the little items and put them in a bag. The next afternoon, we knocked on doors together. Returned the spoon, the stamp, the keychain. Told everyone it was a mix-up or an accident. Most smiled and let it go. One guy called us weirdos. Ben didn't flinch. Back at the apartment, he stood in the doorway of my room and asked, if I ever feel like doing it again, will you tell me not to? I nodded. Every time. He gave a small smile. Thanks. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Again. But not because I was scared this time. Because I was starting to understand something. Dad hadn't just taken apples, or tools, or old wine. He'd taken our compass. And if I didn't step up now, if I didn't help Ben find a new way to feel normal, then we'd both end up just like him. Living by a broken code. Calling it tradition. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not again. 5 years passed like water under a bridge. Quiet. Heavy. And impossible to grab once it moved past you. Then one Monday morning, Mom told us, your father's getting out tomorrow. Just like that. No build-up. No warning. Just a sentence dropped into the middle of her cereal. Ben looked up, halfway through pouring milk. He's really coming back? Mom nodded without looking at either of us. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the soggy flakes in my bowl until they blurred. We were living in a different place by then. Slightly better apartment, smaller town. New start, Mom liked to say. But there's no such thing as a new start when your past knows your name and your address. Richard came home the next day with a canvas duffel bag, a buzz cut, and a look in his eyes I couldn't read. Mom hugged him at the door like no time had passed. Ben hovered in the hallway, unsure whether to run toward him or away. I stood back. At dinner, we all sat at the same rickety kitchen table we'd bought secondhand after the state sold our house. Ben tried. He really did. He asked about Dad's favorite foods, if prison was like the movies, if anyone ever tried to fight him. Dad gave short answers, awkward laughs, but it was clear he didn't know how to be in a house anymore. He kept looking around like he didn't belong in the room, like he was waiting for someone to tell him to leave. Then he turned to me. Nate, you look good. Taller. I just looked back at him. You forgot angrier. Mom cleared her throat. Let's not. No, it's okay, Dad said quietly, setting down his fork. He has every right. I stood up. Ben and I spent 5 years cleaning up after your disaster. We moved twice. Changed schools. Got whispered about in every hallway and grocery store aisle. And now you're here. What? Like we just reset the board. Dad didn't respond. He reached into his duffel and pulled out a black leather notebook, worn and cracked at the spine. He slid it across the table to me. What's this? I asked. My ledger, he said. Every barn. Every estate. Every item. Dates. Value estimates. In some cases, what I think it cost them emotionally. Ben looked between us, confused. You wrote it all down? Started doing it inside, Dad said. Therapist told me to try facing what I'd done. Not just the law I broke, but the people I hurt. I didn't want to forget it, or pretend it wasn't real. I flipped through it. Each page was dated, detailed, painfully neat. Like he was trying to account for every rotten apple we ever touched. You think writing this makes it better? No, he said. I think maybe it's the start. I wanted to throw it back at him. Scream. Tell him no notebook could erase the shame tattooed onto our lives. But I didn't. Because for the first time, he wasn't trying to justify it. He wasn't calling it noble. He wasn't talking about gleaning or God's bounty or frontier traditions. He was just quiet. Ben asked if they could go on a walk the next day. Just the two of them. I didn't stop him. But when they came back, and I heard Dad say something about this old cannery building I used to drive past, my heart stopped cold. That itch in his voice. That hunger. It hadn't gone away. Later that night, I stood in the hallway staring at the ledger on my desk. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. But I believed he wanted to change. The problem was, I also believed he didn't know how. It didn't take long. A week, maybe 2. That was all it took for Dad to start slipping back into old rhythms. It started with harmless chatter. He'd make offhand comments during dinner. Little things, like, you know, there's an old bottling plant outside town, been empty since the 80s, or, saw a greenhouse with busted windows down near Calvert. Ben would light up. Every time. He didn't mean anything by it. He just missed the magic. Missed the way Dad made everything feel like an adventure. And I saw it happening, like a slow-motion car crash. One night, we were watching TV, the three of us crowded onto the couch, when Dad said, I heard there's an old cannery off Route 9. Big place. Abandoned since the pandemic. But it's full of equipment just rusting away. Ben sat up straight. We should go check it out. I turned my head so fast it popped. No, I said flatly. Ben blinked. Why not? We're not doing that. I repeated. End of story. The silence in the room turned heavy. Dad looked at me, jaw tight. It was just a thought, he muttered. No, I said again. It wasn't. It was bait. Mom looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Ben crossed his arms. You don't get to decide everything for us. I leaned forward. I'm not deciding. I'm protecting you. You want to end up in the back of another cruiser? Want another move? Another round of questions from strangers wondering if we're criminals? Dad stood up, slow and stiff. That's enough, Nate. I stood up too. No, not even close. The room felt like it might burst. You never understood what you did to us, I said, my voice shaking. You didn't just take stuff. You built a fairy tale around it. You made us part of it. You let us think it was noble. Dad looked away. You turned stealing into storytelling. I went on. You sold it as tradition, as bonding. And we believed you. God, we believed you. Ben was staring at the floor now, cheeks burning. I was a kid, I said. I didn't know any better. But you did. You were the adult. You were supposed to protect us from things like that, not lead us into them. Finally, Dad spoke. You're right. It was so soft, I almost missed it. He looked at Ben, then at me. I did all of that. I lied. I wrapped it in family and history and nostalgia because it made me feel better, because I didn't want to see what I'd become. He exhaled, heavy, and I used you both to justify it. No one said anything for a long time. Then Dad turned to me. You've got a good head on you. And Ben looks up to you more than he ever did to me. Help him stay clean. Don't let him get wrapped up in this again. I didn't respond. Not right away. I hated that he was right. I also hated that I was the one who had to fix it. But I nodded. Not for him. For Ben. Later that night, Ben came into my room. You were kinda hard on him. Yeah, I said. Ben sat on the edge of my bed. But you were right. We didn't say much else. Just sat in the dark, listening to the buzz of a cheap apartment fridge down the hall. I knew now, adventure didn't have to come from secrets or half-truths. It didn't have to feel like running from something. I would figure out a new kind. For both of us. It happened on a Tuesday. I came home from work, just a part-time gig stocking shelves at the hardware store, and Mom was waiting for me on the couch, phone in her lap, face pale. He crossed county lines, she said quietly. Violation of parole. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, waiting. He told his officer he was just driving, she added. Said he got curious about an old co-op building in Mapleton. Claimed he didn't go inside. But he was warned. Official warning. Next time, it's back inside. I dropped my bag on the floor. He's not going to change, I said. She didn't argue. We sat there in silence for a while, the sound of Ben's video game in the background drifting in from his room. The occasional fake explosion. A ping of success. It all felt like noise from another planet. Mom finally spoke again. I saw it all happening, Nate. I just let it happen. Her voice cracked a little. She wasn't crying, not exactly, but the guilt hung off her like a wet coat. I thought it was about survival at first. We were broke. I told myself he was just being resourceful. And by the time I realized how deep it went, I didn't know how to stop him. I was scared. Of him. Of losing everything. You didn't have to say yes, I said. She nodded. But I did. We were both quiet again. Then she added, almost whispering, I'm sorry. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. Not as Mom. Not as the voice who said everything would be fine when it clearly wasn't. But as a person who made choices. Some good. A lot bad. She looked tired. Honest. A few days later, Dad handed me a thick envelope. No words. Just a handoff in the kitchen while Ben was brushing his teeth. Inside was a printed plan. A real one. Pages of notes, therapy goals, impulse control strategies. It read like something written by someone who wanted to get better, but didn't know how to live without the thrill. At the bottom of the last page, he'd scribbled a note in pen. I know I can't ask for forgiveness, but I'm asking for your eyes. If I go too far again, pull the brake. Please. I folded it and stuck it in the drawer next to the takeout menus. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I was watching. That evening, I went for a walk. The air had cooled again. Early signs of fall were back, leaves starting to turn, the sharp bite of dusk settling in. I passed an old boarded-up mill down the street. Windows shattered, vines climbing up the brick. The kind of place Dad would have marked on a map with a star and a smile. And without thinking, my eyes scanned the edges. Loose fence. Rusty padlock. Access point. It took me a second to realize what I was doing. Then I made myself stop. Made myself look away. As I turned back toward home, I pulled out my phone. Texted Ben. Still clean today? A moment later, his reply lit up the screen. Yeah. You? I stared at the empty reply box. Then typed. Trying. And hit send.